Someone asked me recently what my biggest fear in life was, and my response terrified me. I was petrified, and that prompted a long and hard look inward to try to realize where that fear was coming from. So, what's the one thing you're most afraid of? Is it failure? Maybe rejection? Or like me, loneliness? Because when I got asked that question, I realized that the one thing I'm truly afraid of is being alone. And that's a common fear. Hello, I'm Eva, and I'm the host of Connected with Eva, the podcast on human connection. Today we'll be talking about fear, specifically how our biggest fears can reveal what we truly value, and how human connection can help us overcome fears. So, when I realized my biggest fear was loneliness, it was December, it was just before Christmas, and I wasn't particularly happy with myself, with where I was professionally. And I would have these nightmares every night. I'd wake up and I'd almost have panic attacks, and it was completely paralyzing. It's the kind of fear that you kind of feel lost because you it's so overpowering. You don't know what to do with yourself. So then this year, 2025, actually it was Valentine's Day. I went to this women's only members club on a Friday, Valentine's Day, for a lunch hour, coffee, cake, and conversation, which is such a good initiative, by the way. And the conversation started pretty generalized. So everybody was kind of afraid. You could feel it in their surface level conversation, which is what you would have probably with strangers. But by the end of the hour, the conversation got so deep and inspiring. I had my idea for the podcast. And the podcast is a way to connect with others and create meaningful conversations. It's also my safe haven. It's important to be vulnerable, and for me, mental health is really important, so I really wanted to create this space. So, question number one: why do we have fears? There's obviously the evolutionary perspective, and that's fear is a survival mechanism. Our ancestors, and even us nowadays, couldn't survive without fear because fear protects you. If you see a lion and you think, "Oh, that's such a cute friend," that's not very good for the potential of survival. So fears are helpful. It's in the brain. It's the amygdala that's responsible for detecting threats and triggers, and it's what triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. Fear of heights, which I have, can be traced back to evolutionary advantages. Obviously, avoiding falls. It's quite simple. But if we don't understand where fears come from and why they're actually there to help us, they can paralyze us. Number two, and that's a little more complex, I think, that's learned fears, conditioning and experience. There is the classical conditioning, which is learning through association. For example, if someone had a traumatic experience in a crowded place, they might develop a fear of crowds, agoraphobia, and that's normal. There's observational learning, and this is where we can develop fears by observing others. As human beings, we exist surrounded by others, whether that's school, friends, social circles, parents, families. If a parent is afraid of something, the child might take on their fears, and that's absolutely normal. Unfortunately, as children, we don't have the capacity to be like, oh, okay, so I'm afraid because I'm seeing this being exhibited by a figure that I trust and a figure whose behavior I take as an example of what's right and what's correct. So that's why it's so important to realize where fears come from. There's also cognitive perspective, and that's fear and thought pattern. Something I'm extremely good at is catastrophizing. So good at it. That's when fear comes from imagining the worst case scenarios. For example, and also relevant to my own fear, someone might fear rejection because they assume it will lead to complete isolation. So that means that you're afraid to meet new people, to start new conversations, to have new experiences because of the potential of rejection. And, you know, it could become quite dramatized in our heads as well. What if people laugh at us, and what if they reject us publicly? And we're social creatures. Our ancestors wouldn't be able to exist or to survive if they were rejected by their communities. So all of these things are perfectly normal, but we have to understand where they come from. There's also overgeneralization, and this is where a single negative experience can lead to a generalized fear. For example, everyone's favorite topic, relationships, where one bad relationship or experience can make us fear all future relationships. It can make us closed off to the world, to meeting new people, to being vulnerable, and it's quite dangerous because we cannot truly experience the world if we're not open to it. One example is fear of failure, or the reason why I didn't start this podcast any sooner. And that can start from unrealistic expectations or perfectionism, which I have a lot of. What if people don't even like my voice? What if they cannot follow what I'm saying because it's not interesting? If we allow our negative thoughts to direct our lives, we'll most likely never do absolutely anything of merit, ever. We'll just live in our rooms, closed off, comfortable. And that's quite scary because we have so much potential as humans. There are also social and cultural influences. Fears can be shaped by societal pressures, like the fear of not fitting in or being judged by our communities, which I already talked about, or for women specifically, which is one thing I think about a lot, especially recently, fertility and age, and how society tells you that when you reach a certain age, you're kind of expired. And that's a societal influence on my own negative thought, on my own fear. So I need to realize where it comes from and everyone else. Some fears are culturally specific. For example, in some cultures, there could be a strong fear of supernatural elements, while others, fear of failure or shame might be more prominent. Example, fear of loneliness might be amplified in individualistic societies where self reliance is highly valued. Even when I was growing up, my family was not particularly big. There was the immediate family, and sometimes when I see people have these big, big, big extended families, I'm almost like, it looks so nice to have that kind of support system, which is so similar to where we started off as humans, back to the days where community was everything, and we would exist in communities, in these smallish but bigger than immediate family communities, and everyone would be there for each other, and everyone would have a role and would know their role and would be contributing. And when you live in, especially in the Western world, it's individualism is so praised that people forget about the innate need to connect, because we started off with connection. We couldn't survive without connection. There also are biological factors, genetics, brain chemistry. Some people are more prone to anxiety and fear due to their genetic makeup. Also, some people have higher sensitivities. Have you ever been told, oh, you're always so sensitive? Because I have. I've been told that many times by all sorts of people, but it's especially hurtful when it's by people who should know better, who you rely and trust by immediate family, by really close friends, by partners. There could also be imbalances in brain chemicals like serotonin or dopamine, which could contribute to heightened fear responses. For example, generalized anxiety disorder or phobias could run in entire families. But then it's very difficult to understand the root of things when you're afraid of something and you're told, oh, just don't be afraid. It's that simple. And then the response is, don't people realize fear is literally rooted in our brains? So, no, it's not that simple. There's also, and that's massive, the fear of the unknown, fear of uncertainty. Humans crave predictability. We cannot exist without predictability because if we cannot control things, which we cannot do anyway, we don't know if the impact of them on our lives will be good or bad, positive or negative. We crave the possibility to control things. While a lot of people want to control relationships, interactions, but that's not the natural way of things. There's also illusion of control. When we feel like we've lost control over a situation, fear can intensify. And one fear like that everyone will or has felt at some point in their lives, is fear of death, because it's something inevitable. And it's the anxiety of what happens afterward, because we don't know. So, how does fear relate to human connection? Fear of vulnerability, for example. Many fears, like fear of rejection or judgment, stem from a reluctance to be truly vulnerable. Yet, vulnerability is essential for authentic human connection. There's also fear of abandonment. This particular fear often drives people to seek connection, but can also lead to clinginess, which I'm an expert on, or avoidance of any sort of connection whatsoever. Here we also have different attachment styles, which I'll talk about in a different episode, but I'm sure everyone's heard about. There's also fear of intimacy, philophobia, and that can prevent people from forming close relationships, even though they crave connection. Because we all crave connection. So, where do you think your biggest fear comes from? I feel like one way to truly get close and cozy with the root of our fears is by writing notes. Whether it's in the morning or nighttime before going to bed, write down our thoughts. These uncomfortable thoughts that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to face, because writing down these thoughts will showcase any patterns that exist. And that's the easiest way to try to figure out what's going on. And also to realize that sometimes there's nothing to be afraid of. How do you think these fears that you have shaped the way you connect with others? Write to me. Share your thoughts. Until next time.